Welcome to day 5 at the A4S Summit. We hope you have enjoyed all of the insights and sessions so far during the first week, and lots more to follow next week. Today, we're focusing on disruptive technologies. Technology really provides some of the exciting solutions that we need to tackle the problems that we've been looking at over the past few days. And I'm really pleased to be welcoming Judith Batchelor, who has recorded a session from Harwell to share some of the exciting ways that Sainsbury's have been using technology to give them insights into their full value chain and try and tackle some of the social and environmental problems that they face and embed some of the insights into decision making. So I'll now hand over to Judith, live from Harwell.
Hello and welcome to the Satellite Applications Catapult here at Harwell in Oxfordshire. My name's Judith Batchelor. I'm Director of Corporate Responsibility, Sustainability and Public Affairs at Sainsbury's. And I can imagine the first question you're asking yourself is, what is a supermarket like Sainsbury's doing here at the Satellite Applications Catapult? To answer that question, we need to roll back the clock 6 years and a meeting that was held here with the government's Agritech Sector Council, which was looking at ways in which the very many Earth observation technologies that the UK is famous for could be used to drive a more precise and sustainable fishing and farming sector. And why is that important for Sainsbury's? Sainsbury's is the biggest retailer of sustainable fish in the world, but we have been concerned for a long time about a number of things. The first is that approximately 25% of the world's fish is caught unregulated, unreported and illegally. Also, whilst we use the Marine Stewardship Council certification for our sustainable fish, and that certification scheme is excellent in very many ways, the chain of custody part of that certification only begins when the fish is landed at the port. And of course the impact is in the fisheries, and that part of the value chain for us was pretty much opaque. And if you think of the consequences of that, which is the fact that not only would the fish that were being targeted potentially being overfished, but also there was an impact on the broader species and the diversity of marine life, as well as the marine environment itself, that was something that was of real concern to us. And lastly, as a retailer, our customers would expect us, knowing what we know, to do everything within our power to ensure that the fish that they're buying from us is caught ethically and sustainably. And that includes using the most advanced technologies to guarantee that. And I suppose for you, many of you watching today, the interest in all of this from investors, government, regulators, analysts is unprecedented. And being able to report with real-time data on the value chains that supply our business and ensuring that they are as sustainable, resilient and ethical as they possibly can be has never been more important. So that's the theory. How does that work in practice? Well, 6 years ago was the start of a development of a tool called Ocean Mind. And to find out about how all that works and the very clever technology, let's meet the founder of Ocean Mind, Nick Wise.
Hello Nick, it's great to be back here after all these years to talk about one of my favourite subjects, which is Ocean Mind. And as I think now how Ocean Mind has developed and all the things that it's capable of as a tool, it's hard to imagine that when we first started working together, all we were really occupied with was managing the risk of illegal fishing in our Sainsbury supply chains. And I say, a lot has changed since then. Can you tell us a bit about that journey?
Yes, of course. Well, it's been almost 7 years, I guess, since we started working on how we can bring satellites and data analytics to look at illegal fishing. And we started out in those days with this very basic information.
It doesn't look very basic to me, by the way. It's, yeah, quite something.
Well, the idea is that there are tracking systems for vessels. As we move around the world and as vessels move around, we can see where they are, we can get their GPS locations. And you'd think that would help you understand what was happening. But of course, it's a lot more complicated than that, because there are actually billions and billions of data points to sort through. Many different types of vessel doing all sorts of interesting and different things. And you can't just discount a vessel because it might claim to be a fishing vessel or claim to be a cargo vessel. You have to actually look at its movements and see whether it's involved in fishing activities. But again, that's not enough, because if you know what it's doing, you still need to know whether it's allowed to do that.
Yeah.
And so now you have to look at all of the different lines drawn on the map. You can see all of the areas around the countries, which are their exclusive economic zones, where they manage their fisheries themselves, and they have rules and regulations that you have to follow. You have to have licenses to operate, and you have to understand these things to know whether that's allowed. And then you have these larger areas, these big square boxes, which are management zones for regional fisheries management bodies. And each of these different bodies are governed by an international treaty between countries, and those countries have to agree on rules, and those rules usually relate to one or a group of fish species, and so you end up with different rules and regulations overlaid on other rules and regulations for different vessels in different places, and as you move between places you switch from one set of rules to another. And you have to understand all of this if you want to understand whether that particular tuna that's on your shelf is legal or not.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because you think it's a hot topic at the moment, fisheries management, but it's impossible to think how you would be able to manage that from a regulatory point of view without this kind of technology when you think back. I mean, how did we manage it without all of this? It's amazing.
Indeed, and of course it was mostly back then paper-based as well. Much of the information that was coming from a tuna that was landed in, say, Bangkok, as it was transferred through the supply chain, the original piece of paper that said this was allowed or not was literally that, a piece of paper. And so you might have had a scan of it to go from and to try and do your checks. But now, using this sort of data and artificial intelligence, so that we can detect where the fishing's happening and automatically filter out all of the good activity and start to focus in on those suspicious activities, it really helps. And so you can end up with a picture more like this, where...
Now, this is a phenomenal picture, I have to say. What is that picture?
So this is telling us the movements of vessels that delivered tuna into Bangkok for the course of 1 year. So it shows where all of those vessels came from, and many of these would have been cargo vessels. So as they moved around, they would have met with fishing vessels, and those fishing vessels did the fishing and then transshipped the fish onto those vessels, and then that was delivered back. So this is a point-to-point analysis of all of the different vessels involved in the supply chain just to get tuna through into processing. And you can see it covers more than half of the world.
Wow.
And so to understand all of this requires a really scalable capability to understand what's happening here. But this is just the vessels that you can track. You then have to ask the question, well, what do you do when there are vessels that don't have the tracking devices, or you can't see those?
Or they've switched them off.
Or indeed they've switched them off. And so this is where we turn to satellite imagery. So this is a radar image from space, and it shows the little white dots clustering vessels queuing outside a port waiting to access services. And so we can see here, even at night, even through clouds, where vessels might be, and then cross-reference them with all the tracking devices to see whether there are vessels in places they shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we can use optical imagery, so pictures from space, and you can clearly see different types of vessel as they come in and out of a channel, and so you can start to build a picture of what's happening in an area. And then this is a relatively low resolution image, you can also have higher resolution imagery that allows you to really zoom in on what's happening
and that's from space.
To see. This is a photograph from space, from a satellite called Worldview, and it allows you to really get sort of proper detail on what's happening on that vessel, the layout of its deck. We can start to make estimates of which vessels these are. This is actually two vessels tied together, and you can see I mentioned that tuna was transshipped from fishing vessels to cargo vessels. Well, this is exactly that happening in the Pacific Ocean, and was caught by an optical image. But of course, all of this data doesn't help unless you understand it. And so you have to take that data and boil it down into insights that allow, in this case, Sainsbury's and the supply chain to understand what exactly a particular piece of data means. What are the trends? How do you react to that? If there is something suspicious, what should you do as a result of it?
Yeah.
And of course, we also help the regulators to understand where fishing happens and what they need to do to enforce compliance.
It's funny, isn't it? People tend to think about the regulator and the regulated, but actually we've both got the same aims.
Yes.
We want to be compliant, and in fact, in many cases, want to go beyond compliance. And actually, tools like this help both of us.
Exactly. And so if we can help the regulator understand where non-compliance happens, then they can be more effective at enforcement. But that is a cat and mouse game. That means that they've got to find the non-compliant activity and do something about it. It is much more efficient if we have a culture of compliance where industry also is interested in compliance because of sustainability. You need long-term viability for business. And so working with the regulator, demonstrating compliance, making sure that you demand compliance from your supply chain, and you can because you can prove it, is important.
Well, it's the ultimate guarantee, isn't it? And we want to deal in guarantees, not in promises. That's important.
And so eventually all of this data can be boiled down into coverage information. Where in your supply chain do you have good coverage information? Where do you have insights that you need to gather? And what specific data can you present alongside financial figures that show sustainability information, governance information, and you can get some of this clear picture out of the data.
And what next for Ocean Mind? I mean, this was obviously the beginning, and there's lots of things that have happened since then.
Well, so it's been really exciting. As we've analysed the data, we've found a whole host of new insights that we can draw. So looking back at the tracking data we were talking about earlier, as you analyse vessel movements and artificial intelligence gets more accurate at understanding where fishing is happening, we can start to estimate, for example, how much work a crew has to do to undertake those fishing activities. So we can start to work out whether they're adhering to labour laws. We can see whether they're giving appropriate rest periods to their crew, whether they're allowing them sufficient leave. We can observe all of this with satellites and data. And so we can now look into labour laws for fishing activities as well. But then we've moved outside of fishing because ocean health is directly related to climate and human well-being. And so as we start to look at protecting ocean spaces and making sure that fishing and other activities don't happen there, we're starting to develop new processes for understanding how the ocean is a nature-based solution to climate change. And so by protecting ocean spaces, we can help ecosystems thrive. And a thriving ocean ecosystem can draw down more carbon from the atmosphere and retain it in that ecosystem in the biomass. So we're starting now to look at the idea of climate reserves to give resilience to the ocean against climate impacts, and also encouraging people to develop these climate reserves by building a blue carbon fund. So organisations can start to invest in spaces in the ocean, similar to investment on land and forestry, so that the ocean spaces can contribute towards climate solutions. And developing these funds allows for incentivisation for countries to create the spaces, because suddenly they become valuable to them. And it's no longer more valuable to sell fishing rights. it's better to sell climate rights.
Yeah. And that's the work you're doing with Oxford University, isn't it? The Blue Carbon Project.
It is indeed, yes.
Yeah. No, really interesting. And thank you for this. I mean, it is phenomenal to think how far this has come, and it sounds like it's just the beginning. But yeah, great work. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's been a pleasure working with you.
Fast forward 6 years and here I am just down the road from the Satellite Applications Catapult outside the European Space Agency. And if the grand challenges that we talked of last time around climate change and the environment were important then, they're even more important and urgent now. But we've learnt a lot in the 6 years working with the team at Ocean Mind, and those things are going to help us move at scale and pace. Those are the importance of engaging all stakeholders in the system to drive systemic change. The fact that we need much more than just a coalition of the willing, or indeed a coalition of action. We actually need a coalition of the ambitious, because we have got to move at pace. But also we know one thing from how we've all dealt and worked collaboratively together in the global pandemic that we're now experiencing, that we can drive big change fast if we need to, and we should take encouragement from that. The reason I'm here today is because we've moved from the oceans to the land, and a group of us got together, a large consortium of businesses and technology providers, to submit an application to the European Space Agency for a project that we're calling Forest Mind. And earlier this year, we received the good news that we have £4 million of funding over the next 2 years to build a prototype that will protect and restore the Earth's forests. The timing couldn't be better with new regulation on deforestation in the Environment Bill in the UK and also planned in the EU. And so to tell us more about Forest Mind and this project, I'm pleased to introduce Mark Jarman.
Hello, Mark. Well, tell us about Forest Mind.
So Forest Mind is a new entity that we're launching into the market that's bringing together a variety of amazing expertise from the UK, from space, from economics, from isotopics, looking at helping everybody across supply chains to better evidence and validate sourcing decisions. Really is bringing the best of British capability together into something that can be transformational globally.
I'm sold on this as a concept, but I'm also conscious that there are lots of tools that are working on the deforest agenda. What's so special about Forest Mind?
I think you're completely right. There's lots of tools, and with Forest Mind, we're actually trying to create the ecosystem where we can bring these tools together and deliver the different types of information and support that users like yourself need. We can monitor from space. We've been doing that for 20 years with deforestation, but actually it's more than that. It's about bringing together the tool sets, the information to leverage AI, to leverage deforestation risk from economic analysis of sourcing, packaging that up in a way that creates value and change, whether that's for you as a retailer, but also thinking about it at the production end. How do you benefit farmers as well and incentivize them to deliver the change that you need to stop deforestation?
Yeah. And as you're saying that, I'm thinking I can see all the benefits as a retailer. So the holy grail for me is being able to label products, tell our customers that the products that they're buying from Sainsbury's are guaranteed deforestation free and actually in line with the new regulation. So I can confidently say to the regulator that we're doing everything that we can from a due diligence point of view. So I'm thinking about it from a legal compliance, doing the right thing. I'm thinking about it in helping our customers to make more informed decisions about the products they choose. But there are lots of other stakeholder benefits in having a tool like Forest Mind. So what does the tool offer some of those other stakeholders?
I think if you look at many of the complicated supply chains like soy, it's how do you bring that coalition, the ones that really want to make the change, because everybody has their own desires, their own strengths, their own needs. And within Forest Mind, that's what we're really looking at, is how do you bring those different communities together? Because you could look at it from the financial perspective and validating different assets that they're financing.
Yeah.
communities through all the way to the farmer. And I think that's the interesting thing here, is how do we take all of the ecosystem together who have different parts of the puzzle and bring it together in a way that really delivers value to you as a retailer, but it could also be to the brand that sits and sells you products. It can also be to the enforcement side of things, who are looking at it as to how are we going to deliver a future prosperous global forest ecosystem and ensure that retailers are operating really correctly and professionally.
And I suppose these things are only successful if all the stakeholders can see the benefits to them with their particular lens on it. And of course, once it's sustainable, you can start to drive the systemic change that we all need to see.
Absolutely, and I think working for a Catapult with it as a neutral entity, we're trying to create Forest Mine in that similar ethos, where people can come, validate their sourcing decisions, evidence it, and then we can work with them to help them enact change, because change isn't going to happen overnight. It's going to take years in certain supply chains, but it needs that cluster of organisations who are really ambitious, want to drive and enact new excitement and that based on the consumer, that will transform the way we source and gather products in the future.
Now, I have to say, Mark, I love the technology, so you're going to have to indulge me for a minute, because we're sitting here at the Satellite Applications Catapult. There is an image on the screen behind us. So what's going on here?
I mean, you're completely right. Forest Mine is full of technology, which is brilliant. And this image is just a true colour satellite image from space, showing an area of Mato Grosso in Brazil. And you can clearly see the front between farmland and change and the forestry. And that's the power of space. You get a single point of truth of what is happening globally every single day, which as a retailer, you can start to see from your sourcing in Brazil, what's happening, are my suppliers providing the evidence that tells me that they are providing the product that is deforestation free.
But this is just one image from one type of satellite in space. There are lots of different satellites looking at different things. So what else can we see from space?
You're spot on. There's so much data being gathered now, and we have the capability to exploit it and do that at whatever scale is interest for you. So the next image we'll show is a radar image, which is very different to this traditional satellite image here. So this image is a radar satellite image, which looks incredibly different to your normal images. And what we've taken is 3 different images from different dates and put them together. So areas in red here are areas of change of forest from the first date. Then if you were looking 2 weeks later, areas of green are you're seeing that's changed from the first image. And then areas that are blue are changes that have happened for that third final date. Why is this important is because actually using this information together, we start to characterize what's happening in that forest environment. So you can see the areas of deforestation, but you can see also where farmers are proactively replanting as well. And the grey areas are brilliant because you can see where there's no change. So actually, if you're thinking about it from a sourcing decision point, just analysing and looking at an image alone will tell you so much information about what's happening from a deforestation perspective.
And the devil is in the detail, isn't it? And the other thing that I love that you talk about is the fact that it's not all about deforestation. In fact, there's a lot of good restoration work that's going on around the world. And we want to track the performance of those restoration projects too, don't we?
Absolutely, and I think this is the power of this type of data, is when you think about the regenerative agriculture agenda, how do you provide the support and evidence to farmers, both that they're operating from a deforestation compliance perspective, but actually all of their good work in a farming side of things is delivering benefit to them, so you get a better product at the end of the day.
Yeah, and we can hold ourselves to account because we can measure our performance, and whether that's performance in avoiding deforestation or performance in driving restoration, we certainly can see whether we measure up and whether we're measuring what matters. Absolutely, and I think with Forest Mine, it's about this data, it's about the supply chain sustainability perspective, it's bringing together the economics and the isotopes. All packaged up in a way where you're taking just beautiful picture data and then linking that with supply chain information in a way that adds value to you. And I think that's what's so exciting for me, is we're taking amazing British capability and we're creating something pretty wonderful that could be really revolutionary for supply chain deforestation compliance and far more. Mark, thank you. You're welcome. Thank you very much. I hope that you've enjoyed today's session and the things that we've shared with you around Ocean Mind and Forest Mind, but I thought I would take a few moments to summarise why we think this is important to this audience in particular. And it will be no surprise to you that we are at Sainsbury's hugely concerned around the grand challenges of our time, but we also know that our investors, analysts and the broader finance community are too. And we're also very conscious that we are more than just a business whose purpose is to make profit. In fact, at Sainsbury's, we talk about the fact that our purpose is about helping all of our customers to eat better and at the same time to promote a global planetary system that makes the planet better too. And that's easy to say, but very difficult, because we source from over 70 countries around the world, thousands of products. And what that means in practice is that every minute of the day, somewhere in the world, a fisherman, a farmer, a supplier is acting on our behalf. And we need to make sure that when they are acting on our behalf, they are acting responsibly, sustainably, and ethically, because our vision is to be the most trusted retailer. And that's what you would expect the most trusted retailer to do. So what we source, where we source it, how we source it, and how we buy it, present it, and sell it is key to that vision of being the most trusted retailer and sourcing with integrity. But historically, a lot of the supply chains that do supply us with goods will be managing those supply chains with very traditional auditing tools and paper-based systems. However, the geospatial technologies that you've seen here today and the data that can be layered with those geospatial technologies means that we have insights that take us to the point where we can guarantee things rather than promise them. And that is hugely important for us as a retailer when we want to talk to our customers. And we know it's important for our customers because they tell us it's important. They also tell us that they would like to make more informed choices and more sustainable decisions, but they don't have the information to do that. And when you look at the latest Kantar data on this subject, and you ask customers who they think is doing a good job, only 22% of them can name a brand that they actually think is doing a good job. And I suppose that brings us to the last point that I would like to make, which is if we are going to drive those changes, then it needs to be more than just a single brand trying to do a good job. The system has to do a good job, and the system has to work together so that all stakeholders see the benefit of driving that systematic change that we need to see. And we need to do that at pace, and we need to do that at scale. And whether that's Ocean Mind or whether that's Forest Mind, I hope that today that we've illustrated that we have the technology and data to be able to do that. Thank you.